This is Digital Perspectives with Brad Kimes. Subscribe for new content notifications. Now, here's Brad Kimes. Come on in.
Welcome back to the show, everybody. You can follow me on Twitter at BackupBradleyAbove and everything that we're talking about here today. First thing I wanted to start with is the U.S. debt clock because it is so bad. Right now, U.S. national debt, almost $27 trillion. We know that the Fed is printing money like it's just free candy. What I want to focus on here before we leave this page here is the U.S. total national debts. Now, we covered this back with Cryptopolis, co-host on Friday's show. Shout out to Cryptopolis. 126 trillion U.S. total national assets, and the U.S. unfunded liabilities, the debt, 154 trillion. $25 trillion disparity between the U.S. total national assets and the U.S. unfunded liabilities. Now, we covered that a few months ago when that crossed over and went from positive to negative and actually became insolvent. So the conversation we're going to have here today is twofold. One is about the debt, the possibility of a debt jubilee, not only in the United States, but in the world. And the other conversation you have to have, I believe, if you're going to have that discussion, is also about the global reserve currency status of the U.S. dollar going away, at least in the way that we understand it. So let's go ahead and get started. And before we do, you know how we do it. Let's do today's numbers. And today's numbers, by the way, are brought to you by Unstoppable Domains. Guys, somebody bought sex.crypto for $40 and sold it for $90,000. And it's not the only one. There's many, many others that have gone for a lot of money. $40 for a domain, sometimes $80, I believe. And I think sometimes you can even pick them up for $20. But the reality is when I'm watching this market go flat or fall, this has been something else to me that I realized that, you know, you could buy a name like I own bradkimes.crypto, and people could send you money directly, no intermediaries on the blockchain. And it's fascinating because I understand this is where it's going. Have fun with it. Check it out. There's links in the description, link in the top of the comment box, and some other stuff too that can help you out. So make sure you check it out. Right now, the market is terrible. Bitcoin, $10,000, $10,047.01. Ethereum, $336.50. XRP is 23 cents. Let's drill down on the numbers. 0.2353. Market cap is 10.5 billion. 24-hour volume right now is 1.8 billion. We're down about 2%. And the total circulating supply remains at 45 billion, 11 million plus. Those are your numbers. Okay, so everything is doing awful. Largely except for the stock market. And one of the reasons I wanted to show the debt clock this morning, among many others, but is to show you that the Fed has been propping the stock market up by buying private stocks, corporate bonds, things of that nature. I just covered last week, 30% of the mortgages are owned by the Fed. Well, how about that? There's a huge economic storm coming for the world, and certainly for the largest economy of the world, the United States. And with that, I think it's, you know, a lot of us are early investors in things like crypto and digital assets, but there is a moment that you reach where you understand that you have to pay attention to all of the markets and what has happened economically around the world. It is absolutely going to play a huge role in the digital asset space, and I think we'll all benefit at the end of the day. Let's keep going. So this is a article that came out last April, and I covered it about the global pandemic bailout, which was beginning around that time. Ultimately, America stopped it, they said in the title. As you know, we've seen a lot of spread of the pandemic here as well. I want to give you the first two paragraphs, and then I want to give you just a comment or two throughout this article, and then we're going to move on to another piece. So in mid-April, in a normal year, American citizens rush to finish their tax returns, and the world's financial elite gather in Washington, D.C. for spring meetings of the International Monetary Fund and the World Bank. It is unmissable diary entry for the finance ministers, central bankers, and the finance types from around the world. The spring meetings, unlike the World Economic Forum in Davos, Switzerland in January, which Brad Garlinghouse was at, are on occasion at which policy is actually made. This year is different. Taxes aren't due until July, and the financial elite is grounded as the world economic reels from a shock more sudden and dramatic than ever before. The annual gatherings of the IMF and the World Bank this week, and this was from April, have been reduced to conference calls. As French President Emmanuel Macron put it, we have stopped half the planet to save lives. There's no precedence for that in our history. And that's exactly what all of this leads to. They knew that there was an economic collapse coming. We were reporting on a liquidity crisis before any such pandemic/plandemic ever happened. So at the G20 summit back in 2009, the last crisis that was upon us, the British Prime Minister Gordon Brown at the time, with strong support for the Obama administration, pushed through an increase in the fund's budget to $1 trillion. The British talked enthusiastically about a new Bretton Woods moment. Interestingly enough, we saw just last year, this past year, we saw Mark Carney, the governor of the Bank of England at the time, push for a synthetic hegemonic currency to replace the U.S. dollar. This is an ally of the United States, right? So, moving on. Then we covered this just a short period of time ago, back in July when it came out. This was David Malpass talking in remarks to G20 finance ministers and central bank governors about debt service suspension initiative. Now, you can't make this up. They knew the crisis was going to have to be paid for. I personally believe that certainly there's been a virus and it's spread around the world. It's a terrible pneumonia, and if you have a pre-existing condition, it can be extremely dangerous. We have family members that have had the virus, and fortunately, they've pulled through, but that isn't the case for everybody, and my heart goes out to anybody who's been affected by it. But I do believe the numbers have been conflated to cover up what was a liquidity crisis all along. And I can prove that there was a liquidity crisis all along. The only thing I need to prove after that is the fact that they blame everything on the pandemic and not the fact that there was a liquidity crisis all along. That's all you need to understand. Both things are very real, but that's something I think we all should understand. Okay, getting down into this just a little bit here, they go into the specifics about how the debt service suspension initiative could begin to help alleviate the problem by trying to defer the debt. Now, this is the first step. Forbearance and deferrals are the first step to walking into a bigger conversation about debt forgiveness. Let's keep going. Here is a video I did, and if you guys haven't seen it, Ripple XRP, Nassar Jassar, will the G20 and the IMF World Bank cancel the debt? And I highly recommend you check this video out. There's also in this, and if I skip ahead here just to get to a time marker so you can see the schedule. Let me see if I can find it here. You can't see here, but back in July on the 18th, I believe it was, or right around the 18th, or no, it was on the 20th to 21st, the same time that the CFPB, the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, put the rule into effect about being able to see the cross-border transaction for the sender and receiver before it's actually accepted. They had a fourth digital economy task force meeting with the G20. What do you suppose that was for? Right? What do you suppose all that work was done for? Moving along, we have an article here with the investor Jim Rogers. Doesn't like to say it, but something will replace the U.S. dollar. Reign is ending. It's a very short article, but let's take a look at this. The dollar is on the brink of losing its status as the world's main reserve currency. This article just came out. Prominent U.S. investor Jim Rogers told RT following reports of China's plans to drop a huge chunk of its American debt holdings, which we will talk about in a second. National debt over $26.5 trillion. The U.S. is now the largest debtor nation in the history of the world and is getting higher and higher every day, Rogers said, adding that it's going to take a toll on the country's currency. Traditionally, the U.S. dollar has been soundest currency in the world, but tradition changes, he pointed out, referencing the fate of the British pound, the Dutch guilder, which in previous centuries were considered the most reliable currencies. He goes on to say the dollar may still show strength next year after the current turmoil in America caused by the BLM protesters and the election is over, but that will probably be its last shot. The experienced investor comments come in a wake of report of Chinese state-run newspaper Global Times, in which top local experts said Beijing will likely reduce its U.S. debt holdings by 20%, from $1 trillion to $800 billion. The current tension in Washington and China might even go as far as to sell all of its U.S. bonds in an extreme case like a military conflict, it warned. And we keep hearing this talk about the potential of a military conflict. If Beijing really decides to drop off a fifth of America's debt holdings, it's going to put pressure on interest rates in the United States. Rogers believes interest rates in the U.S. should be going up. So from China's point of view, it is a smart economic investment move, as well as whatever they're doing politically, says the investor, co-founded the Quantum Fund and Soros Fund Management. The old Soros Fund. Yeah. So Jim Rogers is tied deeply to George Soros. Okay. So this is all about breaking the dollar dominance. Now, this is from back in August, just about a month ago. So investors, Jim Rogers, warned of the worst economic downturn of his lifetime. So what he says here. Recent central bank bailouts will bring about the worst economic meltdown in his lifetime. Central banks globally are printing trillions of dollars in an effort to help countries stimulate their respective economies, although the S&P 500 has gone up 50% and has shown no signs of slowing down. Since March 23rd, Rogers believes that the bailout plan is not going to end well in the long term. In fact, Rogers thinks that the U.S. market is a bubble that is waiting to end. Remember, there's an election in the U.S. in 6 months and in November, and all of those guys want to get reelected. They don't care about you and me and our kids. They care about November and getting reelected. So all sorts of good things will keep happening, and the markets will be okay for a while. He went further to remark that Rogers revealed that he owns gold, silver, and is still confident in agriculture. He also said that he would bet on transportation, airline, tourism, and other industries which have been severely affected by the pandemic. Now, one thing I will say here is you can note that he's taking positions in things like transportation, airlines, and tourism because they've been beat up, which means now he's going in and buying on pennies on the dollar. Now, most people don't understand that. Most people think, well, if something goes up, then I'll start to buy it. That's the flaw in the retail investor, primarily, generally speaking. So I bought a shipping company in Russia last week and wine company in China last week. Some of these things have been really beaten down, and probably even if the bear market hits again, they're probably not going to go down much, I hope. So that's where he's at. And interestingly enough, let's keep going. We had these remarks from Jerome Powell himself about how this was, it has to happen. So here we go.
Level. We have not been on such a path for some time, which just means that the debt is growing faster than the economy. This is not the time to act on those concerns. This is the time to use the great fiscal power of the United States to to do what we can to support the economy and try to get through this with as little damage to the longer run productive capacity of the economy as possible. The time will come again, and reasonably soon, I think, where we can think about a long-term way to get our fiscal house in order, and we absolutely need to do that. But this is not the time to be, in my personal view, this is not the time to let that concern, which is a very serious concern, but to let that get in the way of us winning this battle, really.
Unbelievable. I mean, just the historic comments from Jerome Powell from the Fed, and I mean, if there's a guy I wouldn't want to be, it's him. So remarking, they're going to let it run hot. And you know what? You look no further than this chart here to see exactly why Federal Reserve action to propel gold and silver prices. Oh, I'll say. You know, just look at this. I mean, it's horrible what we're walking into. And I can't help but think of all the people who are not aware of what's happening because they look at the stock market and think everything is okay, and they don't realize it's been severely overbought. So that's really a huge problem. So major policy shift was the theme of the U.S. central banks was to allow average inflation targeting, which is going to overshoot, just like they printed the overshoot, right? So they know it's coming, and it's not stoppable. Let's keep going for the sake of this, because I want to get to another point. Here again is the reinforced notion of what Jim Rogers was saying about China dumping its U.S. treasuries because they see there's a strength play for them to back off the dollar. And look, they have made no mistake in where they've positioned themselves. They want to become the global reserve currency of the world. They have not been shy about any of it. They want to be the global reserve currency of the world. What are your options here, ladies and gentlemen? What are your options? Because there is a IMF meeting that's going to happen between October 12th and the 18th. And much of the world is not a fan of the U.S. dollar dominance being the global reserve currency. What are your options? October 12th to the 18th, the October meeting for the IMF, I believe, is going to be an important one. Every 5 years, the special drawing right, the SDR basket, is reviewed. 2020 is the year of the review of that basket. The question I have, the thing I want to pay attention to, is does the U.S. dollar become readjusted, devalued, or debased at its current value? And do they change the percentage or weight of the U.S. dollar in that basket? Do they bring other currencies or assets into this basket? Many things to watch out for in October. Keeping this going, we know while all of this is happening, this backdrop of this terrible economic nightmare globally and domestically, Ripple has been a leading proponent in the ISO 2022 enable global interoperability and improve customer experience for payments. ISO 2022 is in 70 countries and is estimated that 87% of global financial transactions will be supported by the ISO 2022 by 2023, if not sooner. The fact that they were brought on as the only member to pursue distributed ledger technology, understanding that they honestly can get entities hooked up within 5 to 8 weeks. Generally speaking, 5 to 8 weeks, they can be up and running. That's the reality. Just like Brian Brooks has said very clearly that 23-24 is an unacceptable goal for Fed now. And Fed's idea of being ready for a digital currency, digital wallet, and faster payments. Unacceptable. A public-private relationship can change this immediately. And I bring it back to 2017. The Federal Reserve Faster Payments Task Force had Ripple cited as a solution to exactly that. Ryan Zagone was on the steering committee, which was the implementation of the findings of the McKinsey report from that task force. They have done everything, and that steering committee has been disbanded because they did it. They did what they were supposed to do from those findings. Everything to me is much further in place than we realize. I really do believe that. Now, does that mean that there are no businesses, financial institutions, or entities out here that need to update and update their legacy systems into a more suitable or adaptable place to where they can connect to the new financial rails? Of course, there's plenty of that out here. But I say that they have focused on the top tier players of the world because they know that they are the ones that can provide the utility and the liquidity, which both are needed to bring value to a new currency or a new asset of the world. Ripple is looking to hire an expert to investigate and monitor the XRP ledger and probe suspicious activity. The person who fills Ripple's new investigations analyst opening will join Ripple's Bank Secrecy Act compliance team. Are you hearing this? Is this on? The person who fills the new investigation analyst role will join Ripple's Bank Secrecy Act compliance team. This is the depth and level at which Ripple has been working. Remember, they have a headquarters in D.C. They have been working closer with regulators and governments around the world than any other digital asset blockchain company on the planet. But yet there's no designation on the asset. But yet Bitcoin and Ethereum have gotten a pass. I don't feel that that's a mistake. I feel that that's intentional. Because RippleNet, the XRP ledger, the XRP token are all going to be held to a heightened prudential because of the importance it will be to the entire framework of the digital asset space. I really, really believe this. And when you have a company, a blockchain infrastructure company like Ripple, going the distance to have a bank secrecy compliance team, which they have had for some time, you can see that they are still walking towards satisfying that role of being the asset, the ledger, that can be suited to be the foundation for the framework of the new financial system. What I really see here is a real solution. What I really see here is at some point we're going to see a grand unveiling. All of this work being selected to be the ISO 2022, which is the standard for financial institutions around the world. Ripple is the only member pursuing distributed ledger technology on that committee. What do you think's going to happen? You think there's really going to be a moment where we'll take everything except the asset that could solve the problem of the world right now? Then I look at this diagram here. This says it all. You can see the people and the players in here. Everything from CLS to SWIFT to Visa to Wall Street, Bank of America, PayPal. I really do believe that Jack the Rippler has said it best here. If you're holding XRP, then you're holding your own empire in your hands. Well said, Jack the Rippler. Guys, that's going to do it for me. There is a huge storm brewing. And it's actually here. It's just that not everybody's got the email yet, but I think we all will very soon. And I think it's going to be a moment in time that will be remembered throughout all history, that people will look back on for generations upon generations, that this moment has happened. There needs to be a change. There has to be some kind of change. The dollar is under too much stress. Some of the biggest holders of the United States debt are beginning to liquidate their positions. There is a call to arms from the BRICS coalition, Russia and everyone in the coalition, to steer away from the use and settlement of the U.S. dollar as well. The IMF is holding webinars on how to do an external adjustment to the United States dollar exchange rate peg, which means we're talking about devaluing the dollar against every other country in the world. When it happens, I can't know. Will it happen? I believe so. And I believe that XRP will be the solution for it when it happens. All right, guys, that's going to do it for me. Hit the like and subscribe. Make sure you share with somebody you know. I'll catch all of you on the next one.